Hey everybody, it's Eccentric here with the Pompano Beach Cultural Center, and we are back for Blended Conversations, our summer series. We are excited to be here with you. We first want to start by saying we hope that you and your family have been safe during this time and that you guys are making the most of the time that you have together. So if you're not familiar with Blended Conversations, just a little overview about the program itself. Blended is kind of like a tiny desk concert. So what you'll see is some performances from our featured artists of the month, and then you'll get good candid conversations. Blended was created to allow us to see that although we are very different, we are pretty much the same. We have core values that kind of resonate within different cultures, whether it's food or our hobbies or music or the arts. There's always something that we can talk about and bridge those cultures and personality, hence the name Blended Conversation. So this month, I wanted to start off with a dear friend of mine. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's a tiger for Pompano people who know what I mean. He writes on Own Network for David Makes Man, and we'll get into a little bit more about that. We'll let him introduce himself to you guys, and I want you guys to welcome my friend Richard Byrd Wilson. Hey, Byrd.
You, what's going on?
How are you?
I'm good. An amazing
Perfect. Thank you
intro.
so much for having us, or for I guess what is it for coming on the show?
hmm
I guess we're inviting you out. So
hmm
this is all new to me, right? Doing it this way, generally Blended is so interactive. So I'm hoping we keep that same vibe and people
hmm
get to interact with us once they go ahead and join in on the conversation. So we generally start with you telling me a little bit about yourself.
My name's Richard Byrd Wilson. I got the nickname Bird in college. My friends used to stand in the back of the audiences when I would do poems and just make bird noises. So yeah, it just kind of stuck around, and it became a thing where when I was doing poetry or when I was doing something creative, I was Bird. And then when I would have to, even after college, when I would go to a 9 to 5 job, I was Richard. And as those worlds start to kind of blend into each other, the Bird part took over, which is the great part, which is the part of the things I wanted to do, my hobbies and my passion. So yeah.
That kind of happens, right? You kind of
Mhm.
your worlds just kind of find itself blending. I remember a friend of mine, she was like, people don't even know your name. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, I'm talking to this girl and she says, you have to know her. And she's like, yeah, Shay. And she's like, who? She's like, she's like, who are you talking about?
Mhm.
And she's like, eccentric. And she's like, oh yeah, I know her. And so I totally get what you mean by it merging. When I went back to work, it was very difficult for me to start hearing Shay all the time outside of like my personal family. So I
Mhm.
totally get it. What's happening with your work? What's going on? What are you working on?
A lot of this, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom calls. So right now we're in the middle of writing season 2 of David Makes Man. We had started the writers' room when the world shut down. So they let us, of course, right before the world shut down. Actually, they kind of let us come back home. And so since then we've been on Zoom, and it's been a little challenging because there's something you lose in not being able to be in contact with people, especially when you're trying to like brainstorm and come up with things. So it's been a challenge, but we've been, making do, and it's been good to see everybody on a pretty much not a daily basis, but we probably talk to each other about 3 or 4 times a week, and we have our
Nice.
writers' room over Zoom. So it's like 8 or 9 of us on a virtual call, getting it done.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
All right, so I think that's enough with the introductions. I think people want to go ahead into your poem. I think it's only fitting. I asked you to do this specific poem because it is African American Music Month,
Mhm.
and you have this incredible, incredible poem that you wrote and performed. So I think we'll go into that poem first, and then we'll
Mhm.
come back, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll get into some really candid questions with you.
We've always had a certain rhythm. Nowadays, some people see that as more stereotypical than miracle. Like you don't know magic when you see it, divine skill. Black history is a story of tap dancing through minefields of sure will, like we sure will make it, have it taken and create again, cause making it is all we know. Breaking boundaries, from the blues to the boycotts, never bothered by your bias, even when bound. We put faith in him and hum through it. Put the code in the spiritual to find our way, we always find a way. Fast forward, we free, but still can't find harmony. Even when people try to sour our melodies, we keep the cadence. Like, look at what this melanin made way before today. We planted seeds. Now jazz still grows in the gardens. So even when country music forgets its roots, we grow with it. We're stuck between hard places, so we rock and roll with it. Found spaces where muted tongues could speak easy. Sung songs when singing wasn't easy, like Nina singing I wish I knew how it would feel to be free, a free that we're still fighting for. Making beautiful ballads in the midst of this madness, and look where we landed. Imagine a song so powerful it breaks through the hate. A lyric so brilliant the whole world feels it. We did it, we'll do it again. Rewriting history, creating the trends despite all the forces that don't want us to win. We keep finding our rhythm again and again, from house music to techno, rap to trap. It's all underground, redefining what the bass meant. You put us in a dungeon and we become family. Just look at what these outcasts do. We go diamond, I'm just rhyming. Keeping up with that old tradition passed to me, somewhere in between the Psalms. My aunt used to sing, my mom cleaning the house to Al Green and some Lil Wayne 16s, but what does it really all mean? From railroad to real rap, it's all underground. Still rising from underneath until the magic is all that you can see. Next thing you know, the whole world wants some Yeezys. Had the president listening to Jeezy, and believe me, it's not just fame. It's about kids with no Wi-Fi knowing Beyonce's name. It's more than just sound. It's about that man in the Ku Klux Klan that can't get his son to put that hip-hop down. Look what we have found. Look what we do with it. It's music. It's influence. Because if black people have taught us anything over the year, it's that the rhythm in our system is just the sound of persistence, and it is music to everyone's ears.
All right, so we have just seen Rhythm, and I'm a huge fan. Let me start by saying that. And a lot of times people don't realize, even though you're a poet or you're a writer or you do the same thing, you become huge fans of the people you love. And I am a huge, huge fan of yours. So tell me about writing Rhythm.
Yeah, first off, just like myself, like I am a huge fan of yours as well. That happens with us a lot of times, where it's like our friends are the same people that we end up loving each other's stuff so much. So yeah, for sure. Rhythm, Rhythm was one of those prompt poems actually, where I didn't really go into it with like a, hey, I'm gonna write this poem about Black music. It there was, I want to say, a competition coming up. I believe I wrote that poem specifically for Jazz in the Gardens competition. So it was one of the times where you're given an assignment and you go, rather than it just being some inspiration I had.
Right.
And honestly, I waited to like the last minute, and I really couldn't think of anything. And then it's one of those where I started writing, and maybe like an hour or two later, like that was kind of like what came out. And it was amazing, and I spent the rest of the time more just crafting that poem up. That's one of those poems that where you start on it and then you go back and edit and edit and edit and keep making it better and better. Like, how do I hit my point harder? What references didn't I remember in my music poem? Or is there a part of like, are there any parts that I'm skipping over? And after just going back and editing it up, I kind of got to a version I was comfortable with. So it's one of my favorites too. It's energetic, and I kind of love performing it.
Yeah, it's a very high energy poem, and I love that poem. So at this point, if we were in person, you would typically pull a question out of the jar, and we would talk about that question between yourself and the audience. So since we cannot do that, I'm going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 5. I'll give you a question, and that's how we'll pretend like you're picking the question randomly out of a jar.
That's me picking the question.
That's you picking. Perfect.
I picked number 2.
Number 2. Tell me one of your favorite traditions around a dinner table.
Favorite traditions around a dinner table. This is a tough one. I don't know. Maybe I should have picked one. Okay, I think this is this doesn't really count as an answer to your question, but it semi counts as an answer to your question. So I actually saw this, and it's not even something I do all the time. I was at a friend's house for Thanksgiving, and it was like one of those like, hey, you go party with you spend Thanksgiving with your family, then you go hang out with your friends after. And one of the coolest things that I remember is I had never had a tradition where on Thanksgiving we all like kind of stood in the circle and went around and said what we're thankful for. Like, I've seen that happen, but I had never seen it like as a tradition.
Real life movie.
And I did it, and it was one of the coolest things ever. And it was just like, wow. It sounds so simple, but yeah, just something as simple as that. I love like the little corny stuff like that. Like just going around like saying what you're thankful for, and just that, that camaraderie in general.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's straight out of a movie scene. I don't think we've necessarily ever really done that either. But it's one of those things you assume that sometimes it might be better to speak out loud. I know a lot of times we can assume some things, and a lot of things become left unsaid with the people we love because we assume they know what we're thankful for, what we're thinking. So I think that's a good point. So if you're out there and you're not saying it enough because you think people know, or you assume the people you love know you well enough to know, get in the habit of saying things like, I love you, like I'm thankful for the time we have together. You remember that trip? I think, Byrd, every major, outside of individual competitions, events in my career in regards to poetry, you've been there. We've been to Chicago together. We've been to, I think, Decatur. Yeah, Decatur together, and we have had such a good time. I'm thankful for your friendship and your artistry, and what it means to not only Pompano, but now Los Angeles. I know you spent some time in Orlando when you guys start to film, but just across the country. You've been to Oakland without me, obviously, but I know you didn't, so you get a pass.
Okay.
So the magic you continue to sprinkle throughout the country. So I appreciate that. So what's some of your favorite traditions around a dinner table? Start thinking about that. Chime in. Let us know the things that make your family, and the things that make you, and the things that you do around food. I mean, I like to eat, so I'm always interested in thoughts around the dinner table. So ready for another poem?
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, we're gonna go with my favorite poem of yours. And typically, I do know what it feels like for people to have a favorite poem, and they're like, "Can you do that poem? Can you do that poem?" And you're like, "No, I am tired of doing that poem."
It's like It's like the artist that writes a hit, and then when they go places, like people just want them to do. Hey, do your new stuff is cool, but do that one. Do that one I like with the thing in it.
It's like a one-hit wonder, but you got 100 in the bag, right?
Yeah, you like, no, I got this other stuff, but no. I think Phoenix was maybe my second poem like that, where I knew I wrote this poem called Fearless, or like I'm Scared. And it was more of a love poem, and I remember it being the first poem that I kind of considered like a hit because I kept getting asked to do it over and over again once I spit it. And Phoenix became that as well. And it's a joy to perform. This was a poem I wrote for myself because I wasn't feeling the way the poem talked about it. I know one of the lines in the poem is, sometimes you have to speak confidence into yourself. And that's literally what the whole poem is. That's literally what the whole poem
so
is.
interesting you say that before we get into the poem, because a lot of times that's what it is. We write these poems and people assume that we got that on lock. It's exactly who we are and how we feel, and you're in your Superman or Superwoman pose, and you're like, yo, I was really kind of sucky at that point. So it's interesting to hear you say that. I don't think we've ever discussed Phoenix outside of my hearing it and loving it. So it's very cool to hear the backstory on Phoenix. So I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I do. Here's Richard Byrd with Phoenix.
So what happens when a phoenix loses fire? I'm asking you, what does a hopeless dreamer do when you lose all desire, when that dancer's feet can't keep up with his heartbeat, when an artist is being enslaved by the next masterpiece? What does a singer do when their soul is off key? This poem is for 25-hour days. This poem is for 8-day weeks when time does not fly. It moves a bit slower when it's hard to get by, but we've all been there. When your practice just don't add up to the outcome. All that time you put in don't coincide with your income when a writer is just tired. They say we're living in days when we are easily angered, but slowly inspired. When passions flame flickers, I ask you to remember, can you try and remember why it is you do the things you do? Like, what is the reason you make your sacrifice? I know on my darkest nights, I had to write to reignite, because sometimes life will take its toll. But there's no debit or credit to this. I write this like a Nike check, and I just do it. So let's really get into it. About the times I had to uplift me when I need uplifting. I write these lines when I'm out of alignment. I wish I could tell you every line I said I meant. But sometimes I have to admit, I write how it should be rather than how it is. I'm trying to speak a new me into being, because sometimes you got to talk confidence into yourself. Then I find myself asking myself, am I by myself? I often wonder, is the rest of this world just as messed up as me? I wonder, are we all unfinished puzzles pretending we found our missing pieces? I wonder, are we all just a bunch of broken glass in beautiful garbage bags? I wonder, are we pointing fingers at each other to divert attention from ourselves? I think we may be afraid of ourselves. So you can ask me how I'm doing. I'm chilling. How about you? That really means I got a bag full of problems in my back pocket, but I know you do too. Some mother and father issues, some career and passion conflicts. Man, I've been in some relationship wrecks, but I bet you have too. I get to step up here and get a little bit of it out of me. I smoke quotes from my own notebook in hopes of being a higher me. Not perfect by a long shot. I made my mistakes. I had to pay the fee, but hopefully my father has forgiven me. For days, I contemplated death for no reason. I already have regrets about decisions I haven't even made yet. For days, I shoved my insecurities inside of her and called it meaningless sex. There were days where I lied, because the truth was something I didn't think you had the time. I didn't think you had the attention span to hear, but I'm still here. Remembering that hollow me. aspiring to reclaim the same fire that inspired me. Because some days you gotta forget their hate, you gotta forget their gossiping, you better love yourself without apology. They call me Byrd, undoubtedly, but with these words of Phoenix, I gotta be. So if you never knew, well, now you know. A while ago, I too lost control. That same emptiness helped make me whole. All flowers have weathered the same storm before, because when you're that deep in dirt, you have no choice but to grow. I found me though. So tell the dreamer, forget your situation. You take back your inspiration. You better walk like you never lost it. Forget exhaustion. I don't care if you have to snatch your dream out of the throat of a nightmare. You tell the singer, you better sing. And when you do, you sing like your next note is so powerful, it can make a demon flatline. Tell the dancer to dance. You better move like your heart beats the bass line. And for my writers, when writer's block has you boxed in, you punch line. You box back. And if you are none of that, if you are none of the above, you remember why you love. Why do you do the things you do? Forget the BS. Your passion is like Red Bull. It's your wings. Take flight. Use my words like gasoline. Our heart's the spark. Let's reignite.
Yeah. All right. I hope you enjoyed Phoenix. Byrd, that poem still always moves me every single time. There is not a second that I listen to that poem that I'm not moved by it. That's great work, partner, brother, friend, all of that good stuff. You're black, you're back, you're black. Yeah, you are, but it's not what I meant to say. You are back on the clock with pulling out of the jar. I should have had a jar, right? I didn't think about this. But pull out of my jar and tell me a number 1 through 5. You've already selected 2, so you only got 4 choices.
Let's go with 5. Let's go 5.
5.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your proudest moment as an artist.
Ooh, okay.
I told you.
That's a big one.
Come on.
My proudest moment as an artist. There's like there's so many of them. I'm trying to think.
And I don't want you to just think in terms of poetry. I want you to think in terms of your artistry as a whole, because I know a lot of times when you're a poet and you're really good at it, you kind of get put in this box, right? Mm-hmm. Where people only talk about your poetry, but you are many things and multifaceted. So it can be poetry, but it can be something else as well, if that helps. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, it does for sure. It does for sure. Okay, I would say of many moments, I want to say one of the proudest is when I finished my first CD. I have a poetry CD called Vegas Love and Other Addictions, and it took me like 2 years to make. A lot of it was, in hindsight, a lot of it was me trying to go on the internet, like YouTube, and like find beats I could lease, and then turning those into poetry, I don't even know what you call it, to poems and sort of songs as well. But right. I just remember when my album released, like I had this overwhelming feeling of like, oh my God, I did that. Like sometimes, you just think of doing something, and it took me 2 years. That's what I remember. I remember going, I'm going to make a CD and having all these ideas. And then the amount of time and work that it took, and it finally came out, and all my friends showed up. I remember coming to, we were at the Hard Rock in Hollywood at the time, and then I get there, and it's like a packed room, and it was like, oh my God, they're here to see me. Like this is mine, and it's especially as a person who is just, for most of the time I've been doing poetry, it's been on teams. It's been like you said, we've been doing poetry together at all those competitions. And when I was in college, I was doing poems with me and 5 other people as well. So a lot of times that was my comfort zone. So stepping outside of that and going like, this thing is yours, and it was a different feeling. And yeah, so I would say probably my
I was there that night. Mm-hmm. I was there that night. It was amazing. The CD is bomb. By the way, if you have not copped it, reach out to Byrd. We'll give you his contact information at the end of this. And I'm sure he can get that CD over to you, probably digitally these days. But if you have not heard it, check it out. I think what stood out with that answer was that you said it was mine, right? And when we're talking to audience members who may not be artists, who may not be poets, who may not be painters, who may not be writers, but they're people, and there's always something that belongs to us that makes us proud. So with that being said, what is your proudest moment? If you are an artist, as an artist, if you're not an artist, has there been a piece of art or an artist that has touched you, that has led to your proudest moment? What is something you created? I don't think we realize how much of us is a creation in itself. And we create things every single day, right? A mother might not think that her proudest accomplishment or creation or artist work is one of her children, but it takes a lot of work to create life. Like, we are all creators in some form or fashion. And that's what I really like to get people to understand. So I really, really liked how you said it was yours. And you did a fabulous, fabulous job on that album, by the way.
Thank
that
you.
was a good night. We had some fun, huh?
We did. It was funny when you were talking about like the album being good. It's just funny as artists how even like I talk about how proud I was. Now I can't really, when I listen to the CD, I'm thinking about how much better the next one's gonna be. So it gets hard to enjoy that thing in that box because you realize how much you've even grown since then. Where it's like you're listening back now, like, I would have left that track out, or just with your new knowledge, all the things you would have did differently. But that's the dope part about art. You put it out there and it exists, and you get a chance to go do it another time, but you don't get a chance to go back and go, hey, I'm going to go fix that thing. Like, no, that exists, and it's in the world, and it's amazing in its own right, and the next one will be something different.
Absolutely. I think I feel the same way about my album. I cringe. It's cringe-worthy. And I listen to it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, that girl is so long gone. So it's not even funny. It's funny how life does that to an artist. You create this body of work, and then you look back on it, or you hear it, or you see yourself in that moment, and you're like, man, I am nowhere near this person. And like you said, you want to go back and kind of fix it, but you can't. It's one of those things that just exist as we exist, right? And as we grow and as we change as artists. So that's a great point. I think if I'm sharing, I'm trying to think I think my proudest moment as an artist was when, so we had come off of a second place win nationally in Decatur. And February, I had suffered a miscarriage. And WOWPS was in March. And I was already, for those of you who know, that's Women of the World Poetry Slam. And Chunky, who was our coach at the time, she was like, are we still going? And I remember the strength it took for me to say, okay, yeah, we're still gonna go. And I went to Dallas for the first time. It was my first time in Dallas, and the air just smelled differently. It was everything I needed, right? And so this is my first time performing alone. I hadn't even been slamming a year yet. I was scared to death. I mean, just afraid, shaking in my boots, but no one will ever know because I'm a G. And G's don't get scared. G's don't get scared. And I went to WOWPS for the first time, and I made final stage. And I ranked 9th in the world. In the entire world. And I was like, how did this broken girl do that? I was so broken. And I remember being on final stage by myself, and the poem I chose to do was a poem about my miscarriage. Really big mistake, because it was really, really fresh. You guys weren't there to uphold me, to give me that energy you get. You know, and it's an exchange of energy when you're on a team and you're up and you're performing with people. So I didn't have that. They didn't let Chunky in the back. It was a bunch of lights. And here I was trying to spit my heart and get people to understand what I was feeling. But I say that to say, I think that's my proudest moment, pushing through that loss and achieving something I've never would imagine that I could achieve on that level. So
that's amazing.
That's probably,
you were proud of you.
Thank you. Y'all was rooting on Facebook, and I was checking Facebook. Come on, Pompano. I'm like, yeah, exit 36. They locked me in that room with them girls who have been doing this for the longest.
Some of the
I
best
had
in the world.
It's a whole different world, man.
I'm sure it lets you know right then that you were among them, for sure.
For sure. And it kind of lets you know you belong. I'm sure when you walked into that packed house, you're like, I have arrived. It is I here, and I'm here. I want you to pick another question before we get to your final poem.
Let's go with one. Let's go with one.
One.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the role of an artist is in today's society?
Ooh. And yeah, with the given how society's been going, I think that role is ever changing. But I believe the role is to be the griot. It is to use your voice for something, and it's not to say a specific thing, but it's not to say a specific thing, but I believe it is to tell a story. And I believe in these times that if it is your art, I believe, as they say, everything, we protest in different ways. And I believe as an artist, it is my job to put my protest in my art. And not to say that you have to do that with everything that you do, but I do believe there is a role in your work for those things. I know it is in mine. So yeah, I would say that's the answer. It's just to tell a story and be the cause of some change through what you do. And for me, that's poetry. So I try to, speak the truth and put it plain.
Absolutely. I think you said, I'm always, when I hear the word story, I light up. Mm-hmm. Because if anybody knows me, I am quite candid most times. I am very,
That's true.
I try to be very honest with myself first and foremost, be very honest with myself and my story. And that way, when I interact with people, not only can I expect the same, but they can get the same from me. So when you said to tell our stories, whatever story that is, whether that's a poem, whether that's a painting, whether that's David Makes Man, mm-hmm. The arts have this way of pulling us from our current space and time and reality and shifting that thought process. So you leave one world, you go into the story that we have created, and then you go back into your world and you see it differently because of the stories that you experience from artists, mm-hmm. right?
For sure.
And I think that's the coolest thing ever about it. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get like you and be big time, go to Hollywood, get a couple writing gigs, not that I don't love this place, but every now and again, sit in the writer's room. But I really, really think that's important. I always tell people, nobody can tell your story like you, so make sure you're the one telling it.
For sure.
Yep, as much as I love you, I can never tell Byrd's story like Byrd. So tell your own story, and that way nobody can refute it. So what's your story out there? Tell me your story. What is your story? What makes you special? What makes you you? Share in the comments. Let us see what you're thinking. What is your role in society? Whether you're an artist, whether you're an art lover, whether you're a curator, whether you use the arts to bridge two worlds, mm-hmm. What is your story? All right, we're gonna go into our last performance piece. And Byrd, which one is this? Is this swim?
This is Swimming Pools.
Swimming pool. Yes. Mm-hmm. Tell me about Swimming Pool.
Swimming Pools is a more recent poem. It's one that I love. It's one that it's kind of like, I felt like, how you have that balled up frustration. It's like almost something in the pit of your stomach that tells you need to explain a situation. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times it's weird because, like especially in the poems we do about Black representation or Black oppression, you can feel like you're kind of explaining yourself to white people, not even explaining yourself to white people, but almost explaining racism to white people a little bit. But sometimes I think you do it for yourself. Like there is almost this thing about there's no way that someone's not getting this. So as an artist, what we try to do, we try to make it plain again. Like I'm gonna make it plainer. I'm gonna approach this thing, this very difficult thing, which is just systematic oppression and injustice. I'm gonna try to approach it from a different angle. And I think a lot of times that's what we do with our frustration and our rage. We look to explain or to try to get through the weeds, because a lot of times I believe a lot of things they're made more difficult than they have to be. Or like we won't just call something racism, or we won't see the roots of it. We'll just see what's going on, and we won't see the years and years of struggle behind it. So it's trying to make something very complex, very simple, which, going back to the question, it is kind of one of our jobs.
And I think you said something important. I know a lot of times we do poems and people take it as an explanation, but a lot of times it is us trying to make us feel better or even make sense of it. We don't always know when you're writing something. It's not that you have made sense of it. A lot of it is trying to make sense of it. And a lot of it is trying to compartmentalize and streamline what exactly you're feeling. And again, it goes back to that honesty with yourself, right? If I can explain this and how I'm feeling honestly, then we can start the conversations that need to be had. I remember in another blended conversation, we had an amazing conversation about, I believe this person was in the military and they were in an Asian country, and they were saying how they were offered food that obviously was not customary to us here in the States. And they were trying to explain that, but at the end of the day, they sat at the table, they accepted the plate, and they broke bread. And it wasn't to appease, but rather than to navigate why they were feeling how they were feeling about the food being presented. And it boiled down to the fact that it was an animal we thought might be domestic here, but not necessarily in this part of the country. And he told us how it led him to a truth about himself that he had not realized even while serving in the military. So I think it's important that you said that, because a lot of times people take it as one thing when really it's just us trying to make sense of it as well.
Sure.
Trying to, you know what I mean? Trying to navigate how we feel and where we fit into that. So Swimming Pools is a great poem. Like you said, it's a great, big, huge metaphor that I think has a lot of powerful lines in it. A lot of powerful imagery in it, and I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I enjoyed it. And here's Swimming Pool.
Crazy as it may sound, a lot of Black kids know how not to drown, but not how to swim. Even here, when you live in a place with beach at the end, it would seem natural. Even when they're swimming through unnatural water, even when they're swimming through the dirt that America watered instead of swept up, it can feel like you're making us drown. That water's muddy and deep as the racial wealth gap, deep as your grandma's segregated beaches in the 1960s, of Florida's still somehow segregated schools in 2020. We know the statistics. We know how oppression, it comes in waves. We know how years of white supremacy make poverty more systematic than luck of any draw. You see, kids haven't drawn their first breath before those gears were turning, before color decided who got the home loan and who rented, before redlining made housing discrimination good for business. Generations of survivors, but too often the wealth is not building, and poverty is some of the hardest water to swim in. Even harder on the psyche in the land of riches. Maybe that's why a Black child is like 3 times more likely to drown, more likely to have to wade in the water of the criminal justice system. They will tell you to get your money. They will tell you to focus on capitalism, like the sins of this country's past still don't add into our math, like we still don't move against the current, and the current see us still torn from the torment, the rip tied to our genetics. We survive the sharks, but those predatory lenders might still have their jaws in you too. You can drown in a pool of debt, but we also know tsunamis. We understand how interstate traffic flows or crashes through the heart of a Black community in Jacksonville, in Overtown, in LA. See, the coast don't change the cause. It's rough as gentrification then coming to make new of your town. I guess we're used to being watered down. Breaking that cycle feels like breaking the surface. Ironic, you're thankful for unnecessary air. You will find some up there floating on privilege, have never touched the water, much less the ocean floor, but will still politically pollute that like, yeah, I see you drowning. Why don't you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? They will point at others that made it up like, why can't you be more like them? Like some of them ain't floating on their family sacrifices like some of their grandmas. They have to ask Jesus to show them how to walk on water, but we still pray for our winds like calmer wind. We still pray today that there is no tidal waves, which is cool, till you realize we're not in the ocean. We're in a segregated pool. And the wavy river that you pray against is man-made and in the rules. No one's asking you to feel sorry for the swimmers. No one's playing the victim. There are enough of those. Just remember them when you vote for people who care less or cut the programs that benefit them. No, millions have tried, been kicking for their lives, held their breath while trying to find air for their heirs in hopes that their kids wouldn't have to go through this. Still, it's hard to swim from the depths of America's past when you're anchored to it.
All right. So you just enjoyed swimming pools. You've heard rhythm. You have heard Phoenix. We've been talking to the man, the myth, the legend. The Hollywood star. Pompano turned Hollywood star. I'd be like, yo, I know that guy. That's my friend. Go best friend. Go best friend. That is my guy. So I want you to just tell the people where they can find you, follow you on Facebook, Instagram, and I know you're working on season 2 of David Makes Man, where they can see David Makes Man, the first season, so they're all caught up. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so let's start there. Just tell us where to find you.
So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BYRD Poetry, Byrd Poetry, or on 89 Writers with my writing partner, Lucian. We have a screenwriting page together. That's 89 Writers on Instagram, or 89writers.com if you want more information about us. You want to see.
Okay, website.
Yeah. You want to see some of the stuff we've been up to and keep up, it's 89writers.com. We are working on season 2 of David Makes Man. If you want to watch the first season, you can find it on the OWN network, the OWN app, or if you have Amazon Prime, you can buy it from there. So yeah, that's where you can watch David Makes Man. I forgot, was there another part to the question I was supposed to be answering? I totally forgot.
No, that's it. Where we can find. Sometimes I swear you can hear worse as you can see.
It'd be like that.
I didn't have on my glasses either this morning, so I'm probably doing a little squinting myself. No worries. So yeah, I think that's our time here. Thank you so much again for joining us here at the Pompano Beach Cultural Center and the Pompano Beach Cultural Affairs Department. We appreciate you continuing the arts during this time, allowing us to take up a few minutes of your day, and continuously being there when we call on you. I really, really, really appreciate what you have given to the city and into our department. So from one artist to a next, thank you. And for you out there, always remember you are creators in your own right. You don't have to call yourself anything but awesome. You don't have to call yourself anything but amazing. So always remember you are creating something. Memories, moments, life, poems, movies, TV series, whatever that may be. Just don't stop creating because the world needs it. Peace.
For sure.